Welcome back to the OSM channel. The family and I are currently heading up to Bascom Maple, one of my favorite stores. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Bascom Maple, they produce their own maple syrup. Okay, we're all done. They produce their own maple syrup. They buy syrup from local producers, and they bottle that syrup, and then they sell it and ship it all over the world. But they also sell equipment, and today we're gonna buy some equipment. The wife's not too happy about how much money I'm spending today, but this will be my third year producing syrup, and I think at this point in time we can make some money doing it. We're not gonna be profitable this year, but I'm thinking next year we're gonna start making some money. You see these lines up here? Those are not telecommunication lines, those are sap lines. They run to this storage tank here. I guess they have a tanker truck that comes and empties out this tank. Oh, we are in God's country, I tell you. Love it up here.
Falling off their paws, guarding their sharp teeth, and flying kites outdoors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're here!
Yes, we are. All right, the family and I just got back from our trip, and I guess I'd like to share with you my haul, right? That's what the ladies do when they buy a bunch of clothes. Why can't men do it when they buy a bunch of equipment? So let's talk about some issues I ran into with my syrup operation last year. Evaporator, I was using 2 steam pans. Evaporation rate was just too slow. So I do have a new 2x4 Garvey evaporator pan. I will be building an evaporator. That's a future video, but that's not something I purchased at Bascom. So evaporator was an issue. I ran into an issue in terms of sap collection. I have a very steep hillside, and collecting that sap when the hill is icy with aluminum buckets and 5-gallon water jugs was treacherous. Almost rolled my ankle several times. Another issue I ran into was sap storage, which previous years I've stored my sap in the garage in 5-gallon water jugs, and last year I ran out of storage. 40 gallons was all I was able to hold. So let's talk about the first big purchase here. I purchased a 230-gallon sap storage tank. This is made by CDL 304 stainless. It was expensive, but I view buying a lot of this equipment, it's like buying a trailer or a piece of construction equipment. It's going to lose, maybe 10 or 20% of its value. But then it's really going to retain its value because somebody's always going to have a use for something like this, especially the maple syrup industry. And the maple syrup hobby producers anyway, it's a growing hobby. There's a lot of people on Facebook that are into this. So this tank, it was expensive. It was around $900. The reason I decided to buy all this equipment when I did was because Bascom offers a 10% off sale once a year. And with the way inflation is going, I thought, you know what, it makes sense. Let's just do it now and bite the bullet, and hopefully we'll be making some money down the road. Now, if you're a hobby producer, yes, there's a lot of used IBC totes, and I was thinking about going that route, but I didn't because I have such a hard time trusting somebody that sells me a used IBC tote. Like, you don't know what it had in it. A lot of these guys will remove the stickers before they sell it to you, so you can't verify. You don't know if it was washed out with some type of chemical wash. And you have a responsibility as a syrup producer to produce high quality, safe syrup. And although it's a lot of money, this is going to last a lifetime, and I don't have to worry about microplastics or any kind of chemicals leaching into the sap as it sits in this tank. So it was expensive, but in a year or 2 years, this will have paid for itself. That's the idea. And by the way, this is nothing compared to some of the big producers out there. This is one of the smallest tanks they make. Some of the larger tanks CDL makes, I mean, they get upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 gallons, so nice tank. All right, so what else did I buy? Well, I bought 120 12-ounce glass syrup bottles. And the idea is I want to sell each one of these for $15 a pop because this is a specialty product. You know, it's not made by a big manufacturer. So if I can sell each one of these for $15 a pop, let's do some calculations here. So my goal this year is to make 10 gallons of syrup. So if we do 10 times 128 ounces, because there's 128 ounces in a gallon, gives us with 1,280 ounces. We will divide that by 12, which will tell us how many bottles of syrup hopefully we can make. I mean, this is all just theoretical, of course. So in theory, maybe 106 bottles. And then if we multiply that by 15, that's a gross. That's what we're looking to make. Of course, that's not going to completely pay for everything this year, but next year, we're going to be in the money. That's the hope anyway. Aside from that, I've been against it for a very long time, but I finally decided to transition from buckets. You can see the buckets up on the shelf up there. I decided to transition many of my buckets to the tubing, especially on the hillside. This is 3/16 tubing, and I've been doing a lot of research on this 3/16 tubing. Now, a lot of the big manufacturers, what they will do, they will run vacuum pumps on their tubing lines, and that increases sap yield. However, if you have the topography for it, if you have a steep drop, a hillside, you actually can use natural vacuum. And what happens as you pull a vacuum on your syrup lines, or you have natural vacuum occur, it actually increases sap yield. Not to mention, this is a closed system, and one of the reasons why tap holes close early on is due to bacteria infiltration in the tap hole. And by having a closed system, we reduce the bacteria that can enter into that tap hole and thus end your season early. So the main reason I've been against tubing is because of microplastics. The possibility of microplastics leaching into the sap. However, I've also done some research, and another thing I purchased, which we'll get into in a moment here, is filter press. Filter press, in conjunction with the diatomaceous earth filter aid, which filters out, the niter and all the yucky stuff in the syrup, it can also filter out much of the microplastics that would potentially come from these tubing lines. So it's just the nature of the beast. If you want to grow, you have to be on tubing. I hate to say it, but the old school guys that ran buckets all the time. I mean, heck, even the old school guys, they were using galvanized buckets, which is a no-no nowadays, so it's just how things are nowadays. But of course, along with the tubing, I got fittings, and you can see that there are 4 different types of fittings. So I'm going to call this a starter fitting. So there's a hook right here, so this will be right by the tank. We'll have a piece of wire around a tree or something, an anchor point, and this is where we will start to pull our line uphill. And then whenever we see a maple tree, we have our T. So, the main line, suction line, will run in either direction, downhill and then uphill. And then we have a spot for our drop line. So our drop line will go up to this tap. And the taps I decided to purchase have a check valve. There's a ball valve in here. So the idea is that, I guess when things stop flowing for the night, this check valve ball will close up the tap hole and prevent sap from potentially getting sucked back in the tree, something like that. It's supposed to help increase yield, but I think these are only good for 1 year. That's the only downfall of the check valve spouts. And then, of course, end of line. So this just plugs up the end of the line, and then you would wrap this around your last tree, and then it hooks onto the line itself. 1,000-foot rolls, they weren't too terribly expensive. I think they were $70 or $80, so not bad. And these are, 20 cents a piece, something like that. Of course, I got a lot of caps. If you do buy your syrup bottles from Bascom, the glass bottles do not include caps. So if you buy a lot of equipment from them, that's just something to consider. I do have a big bag of filter aid behind the camera. I feel like I don't really need to show you guys that. But this was the big purchase. This, along with the tank. This is a 7.5-inch short stack filter press. And this is just totally going to transition the quality of my syrup from mediocre with the gravity-fed Orleans filters to this, which will produce crystal clear, top-of-the-line quality syrup. So I'm very excited for this. So there's a guzzler pump over here. It's a manual pump. The bigger operations, they will have some type of mechanical or pneumatic operated pump. Some of them are electric. So let me move the camera in. I'll show you kind of how this works. I'm a little disappointed. It didn't come with any instructions as to how much filter aid to add, what temperature your syrup should be. So this one is made by CDL and it is manufactured in Canada. We have our guzzler pump. This is all FDA food grade materials. So this is the inlet and this is our outlet. And then you have all these plates here. This box right here is filter paper. So the filter paper goes in between the plates. So I'm still learning about this myself, but we loosen up these two screws right here. And this will be the area where the filter aid collects. And then we have our waffle plates. I need to do a lot of research as to how to properly use this, but first step was purchasing it. I am noticing that there are indentations in the casting, raised indentations in the left side of the casting, so that way you don't get mixed up, because the last thing you want to do is have these flip-flop the other way. Things will not work properly. So this is quite a piece of equipment right here. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this thing was expensive, but it's like purchasing a piece of construction equipment. Down the road, if I ever want to get out of the syrup industry, I'm quite certain I could sell this for 90%, maybe 85% of what I bought it for. But then, you add inflation in there, it might be worth what I paid for. For example, my Griffin dump trailer, I paid $6,000 for that trailer. In 2019 or 2020? I think 2020. And I could turn around and sell that trailer for $6,000 because the new ones right now are going for $8,000 to $9,000, and I keep that in pristine condition. So yeah, this is an absolute beaut. Then along with the filter press, I do have some FDA food grade tubing, which I got to figure out how I want to do the connections on here. I see a lot of guys online, they do like, I guess they're called the banjo connections, the quick connects. So I got to figure out the threading sizes and how I want to do this, but we have time. Again, the main thing was just purchasing the equipment and getting it home. And boy, I am excited for this year. So what do you folks think? Am I stupid? Am I crazy? Was this a good purchase? Was it a bad purchase? Well, maybe a little bit of all the above. I think it was a smart financial investment. I'm thinking year number 2 will be in the green. Not to mention we'll have some equity in the bigger pieces of equipment. And there's a lot of really bad hobbies. Really bad hobbies I could be into. And I think of all things I do with my life, making maple syrup gives my life a lot of meaning, a lot of purpose. And I really treasure that. And you know who I have to thank for that? The sponsor of today's video. I'm just joking with you. I don't have any channel sponsors, but I really do have to thank the SSL Family Dad channel. If you've never heard of his channel, go check him out. Tell him the Old Soul Millennial sent you. He has no idea who I am, but I started watching his channel 4 or 5 years ago. Some of my favorite videos of his were when he'd take his daughter out in the woods, they tap these maple trees, collect the sap, put it over their wood-fired basic cinder block evaporator, and they'd make this incredible maple syrup. Beautiful labels they had on their bottles, and now I'm just trying to follow in his footsteps. I have a daughter of my own, and I'm hoping one day she'll come out in the woods and help me tap trees and grow this small operation that I've started here. So big shout out to the SSL Family Dad channel. One other thing before we close out today's video, I now have 3 channel members. Of course, thank you to all my subscribers, but also thank you to the members. And I am planning to do a syrup bottle giveaway to one of my channel members. The only thing is we got to wait till the upcoming maple season, which is going to be in 2027. So if you're thinking about becoming a channel member, think about doing it before 2027. But at the end of the day, thank you for everybody that watches this channel. Without you, things like this would not be possible in my life. So thank you for watching. As always, I will catch you on the next one. We're going to have a lot of work to do with this equipment. Stay tuned.